Okay, great. So let's see, we're at 9 o'clock and it is Sunday, August 1st, 2021, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And where Janet Hogan is Monday morning in Bali. And our topic for today is on humility and how strong leaders are humble. And I am also going to stream this on Facebook. So Janet, why don't you go ahead and get started with introducing yourself?
Sure, thank you, Janice, and thank you for the invitation to co-host this room. So my background is I've run 6 businesses over the course of my life, and in hindsight, when I look back on all of them, none of them I was truly passionate about, but I followed that mantra of, you know, the harder you work, the more money you make, the happier you'll be, in that order. And it really took me to a place where I got everything that I thought I wanted, which was the multi-million-dollar waterfront mansion, private beach next door, 3 beautiful kids, solid marriage, to look around at everything I had and go, oh my God, I spent my whole life climbing this mountain only to reach the summit and go, it's the wrong one. The view from here really sucks. And, you know, the universe has a way of waking us up if we choose not to answer the call. So I refused to do anything. Well, I didn't know what to do. And so the following year, we had the Great Recession. So this was 2008. And over the course of 12 months, I lost everything that we'd spent the whole, you know, the last 30 years working so hard for. And so that was my giant wake-up call. And that's where I had to go, you know, what the hell is going on? What am I here for? And ask all those profound questions that I think all of us have to ask at some point. You know, who am I? What am I here to do? What's the difference I'm here to make in the world? How can I best serve others? And I had to do a crash course in humility, and it was very uncomfortable.
That's great, Janet. And I see Bobby, you've joined. I'd love for you to come up on stage if you're able to speak as well. I'm just starting to send out invitations to some people to also join. And Janet has a wonderful background with the 5th door. I'd love for you to explain that a little bit more, Janet, and some of the laws, in addition to law of humility, to give some context.
Yeah, well, I find it's always helpful, you know, to work out where we are in our lives, to have some sort of model. So I use the model that I call the 5 doors, and very simply, just to explain what that means. And maybe if you're listening to this, see if you can work out which door you might be behind right now. So doorway 1 is what I call living hell. And that's like the worst case scenario, whatever that means for you. You know, it might be bankruptcy or relationship breakdown, or it might be a more emotional state, you know, like just suffering with chronic anxiety or depression. So that's doorway 1. And that's the one that we probably least want to confront. But if we are to get to the 5th door, it's the one that we definitely have to visit. And then doorway 2 is treadmill, and that's a life of absolute compliance. So adhering to what all the various pressures are on us, to comply with those. So typically that's the 9-to-5 job, or staying in the marriage that maybe isn't right for you. Whatever it is, it's just trying to conform to make yourself fit in. But of course that comes at a high cost. And then doorway 3 is where maybe you've decided to break away in some way. You know, maybe you've gone down the entrepreneurial path and you've gone, you know, I'm not just going to, you know, suck it all up. I'm going to chart my own course. But instead of it being like this highway to heaven, it feels more like a roller coaster where there are more downs than ups. And then doorway 4, which I was very fortunate to get to, is called pipe dream. And that's where you have everything you think you wanted, but then and only then do you realize that it was kind of a delusional state. So pipe dream speaks to the opium dens of the past, you know, where you'd be searching for paradise only to realize it was kind of a plastic paradise. It didn't have any substance to it. And I find that's the most challenging door to be behind, because you go, well, where do I go from here? So that's, of course, fortunately, there is one more door, which is the 5th door. And this is where involves a deep dive into understanding who you are, to work out what is your core pain and how you heal that. And in the healing of that pain, you find out what it is that you're here to do. So pain is really the thing that informs your ultimate purpose. But to really deliver on your purpose, you also have to know what it is that you're wired to do. You know, what's your natural aptitude. and then you take that with the thing that you most enjoy. So what this is really a recipe for a joyful life. It's not a life of self-sacrifice. Doing what you love, what you're wired to do, and applying that to solving a problem for others, that in the process heals whatever painful past you've had. And that's really the recipe or formula, if you like, for crossing the threshold into the fifth door.
That's a great framework to think through where we are at in life at any time and how to, move on to different doors. And why don't we talk a little bit about how humility plays a role in each of those stages, or where it plays a part?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Janice. And humility is such an interesting topic because I, for one, always kind of box humility into something that certain people had that I never could, the likes of Mother Teresa, for instance. So the key to humility, let's look at what the word humility means, where it came from. It's from the Latin humilis, which means from the earth. So if you like, humility, to become humble, is an invitation to reconnect with your true self, your grounded self, the person you really are. But what keeps us trapped behind one of those first four doors that I spoke about is the opposite to humility, and that's the egoic self. Okay, so the ego. And I'm not saying that the ego in and of itself is bad. I don't believe that we actually want to remove our ego entirely. It's an important part of who we are. But if you like, it's the fear-driven self. And when we're in a state of fear, we cannot show up as the inspiring leader that, we were born to be. So we have to first address the ego in order to be able to access our true self and show up with humility. Honestly, we could talk about this, Janice, for hours, but that in a nutshell is the nature of humility. It's how we show up as our true self when we're in a state of humility. That's what we're being, is our true self, our vulnerable self.
That's really interesting, because I think sometimes our true and how do we understand what our true and vulnerable self is? And at times, if someone seems like they're not being humble or demonstrating humility, could that be their true selves still? And is the judgmental part of ourselves kind of a flip side of the coin or something?
Yeah, I know. And here's the thing. We hear these truisms, you've got to be authentic, you've got to be your true self. And when they're cliches, they just wash over us, they don't have any meaning. So I find the best way to really understand that is to look for evidence. So go, okay, so my ego typically shows up in one or two ways, or our ego. But the way that's best known is we say of someone, he or she has a huge ego, meaning they're full of themselves, right? And that can show up in lots of different personas. Maybe it's someone who's like a lone wolf. I don't need anybody's help. Or maybe we see it as savior syndrome. I'm here to save you because I'm so evolved and I have the answers. Or it could be a defensive approach, like, only I can do this. Only I can fix this. I'm here to fix you. Or someone maybe who feels that there's simply not enough will show up as, I'm here to exceed everyone's expectations. Or someone who might be fearful that they're stupid might go into know-it-all territory. I will prove you wrong. So when you see yourself being at an extreme of do-goodism, or excellence that doesn't feel sustainable, that's a signal that your ego is taking over from your true self. Does that make sense, Janice?
Yeah, I think so I always think about taking credit, or what does it mean? Being humble, it's very hard for me to come up with the definition for that. So you've given me some new ways of thinking about what humility is.
Yeah, so there's that way when you feel yourself trying to be kind of a superhero that doesn't feel real. That sense of, I must show the world how worthy I am, and search for approval from outside of us, is a sure sign that we are not in a place of humility, that it's our ego that's driving us. And the other way that the ego can show up, again, which blocks us from connecting with our true self, is in beliefs that are self-deflating. You know, I'm not good enough because, and we don't often think of that as an egoic posture, if you like, because we think of the ego as the overinflated self. But the moment we start to play ourselves down and think small, you know, I can't do this because, you know, the world doesn't need another writer, or another book. Why should I even attempt to write this book? You know, any of these kind of thoughts that might be lurking beneath the surface of ourselves, you know, I'm not strong enough, I'm not brave enough, I'm too stupid, or I'm too slow, or whatever I'm too old. These again are constructs of the ego to stop us moving forward and taking action. So think of the ego a little bit like a life buoyancy vest that stops you appreciating or learning to become a really strong swimmer. It's a protective device. And so when we see that there's this inner protector dominating how we show up in the world, that's the first thing that we must address. We can't just go, I want to be humble, I want to achieve humility, without doing the deep dive into that shedding of the ego first.
And I think I was watching your training on the law of humility about their self-deflating and self-inflating types. I'm curious, you know, how you came up with those different kind of types, and also if you can share, you know, quick high level what they are and how we can identify those as, and I think those are indicators of kind of a lack of humility, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, because you would think, if I say, oh, you know, I think I'm being humble when I say, oh, the world doesn't need another book, you know, oh, I think that I could be a great writer. That's how I used to think, and I thought that was being modest. I thought that was noble to think like that. You know, I thought that was non-egoic. No, that's finding an excuse not to show up as you really are. And so, how I came up with those two, if you like, complementary personas is, think of it this way. You know, we talk a lot about division in the world, but one of the reasons there's so much division in the world is because each of us as an individual suffers from inner division. We have two sides. So, you know, in those cartoons of old, they'd show a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other, you know, the sort of the inner sinner and the inner saint. It's actually not that much of an exaggeration as to what's actually going on. So we have inside of us a whole bunch of limiting beliefs, and there tends to be one that sits right at the bottom of all of them, that is the mother of all limiting beliefs, which I call the core destructive belief. And that basically creates the foundation for our house of cards, the thing that stops us from being successful and showing up as who we really are. So generally, we don't know what our core destructive belief is, because it sits in the realm of the subconscious, or as Carl Jung would say, the unconscious self. But typically it's quite dark. You know, it'll be something like, I'm a piece of shit, or I'm just a slut. You know, we have all these different ways of keeping ourselves tiny, and they're usually very dark. And because we have this sense of inner wrongness about ourselves, we try to undo that or neutralize that by a sense of self-righteousness. So that's where the overcompensating self comes in. That's the self-inflating persona, and that's where we try and show up as, you know, bigger and better than is possible to be on a sustainable level. So we're really engaged in this inner tug-of-war between, you know, the self that is full of shame and guilt, and the self that is trying to outrun that shadow by being, you know, by putting in a superhuman effort to prove how good we are. And until we resolve those two selves, we're going to constantly be in a state of flux, doing battle, and, you know, all the consequences that come with that. So the idea is to bring those two selves to the surface, and once we do that, we can start to see the stories that we've been telling ourselves, and that's when we can finally accept who we truly are, which is somewhere in the middle between those two personas. Does that make sense, Janice? I felt I was on a bit of a ramble there, but I hope I got it explained.
Yeah, I understand it, and I think that you know, like you said, we could talk for hours on this topic, and you've already done quite a few, you know, trainings on different laws, and I think this is a particularly good one in these times when we're, I think, under high stress, and I wonder if that also kind of causes us to push ourselves and lose some of our humility or humbleness. And I also wonder if leaders are kind of viewed as weak if they're showing humility. So how are, so bringing us back to that, you know, the title of this, how strong leaders are humble. I would love to talk more about the strength of humility.
Yeah, absolutely. So the humble leader is the opposite to the narcissistic leader. So let's talk about the leader who might appear strong, who actually isn't, right? Because we know who they are. So a narcissistic leader is really in the game for his or her own personal power. And they are essentially fear-driven. They might not look like that because they might present as strong. You know, they might have a strong physical, you know, a physique or a persona that looks commanding. But deep down, they're pretty much in it for themselves. And so in that context, that type of leader squashes the very things that society needs, which are innovation, creativity, problem solving, collaboration, you know, inclusiveness. These are all the qualities that a humble leader can bring out of a society. So we kind of have to know what a humble leader isn't in order to recognize what a humble leader is. Okay, so the narcissistic leader is the leader that we tend to see more of in society, unfortunately, and they are all really there just for a power grab. And what happens is that they then disempower all the people that they have dominion over, who gladly hand their power to that leader. So that's on one side of the ring. On the other side of the ring, we then have the humble leader. And the humble leader is someone who creates a context or a safe container, be it a political party, you know, or a country or a football team or whatever it is, a safe container for others to flourish and step forward. Someone who has the confidence, the inner confidence to not feel that they have to be, you know, holding the mic the whole time, to allow others to step up and show their strength, to encourage collaboration. That's really the hallmark of a humble leader. To not sacrifice themselves, but put themselves at the back of the room to allow others to step forward. So in this space, people feel safe and they feel protected, and this is really, and we know those humble leaders, you know, because the humble leaders, interestingly, the ones who are not necessarily in it just for the power, seem to be the ones that leave the greatest legacy because they are attached to a vision that's bigger than themselves.
I'd love for you to share some examples of humble leaders today or in the past. And I know we did this exercise of people thinking about somebody humble. As you've done your work in this area, I'd love to hear your specific examples that come to mind, whether it's current or kind of past.
It's probably stay away from the cliches, because there are obviously people like Gandhi, and we know him as a humble leader. He was attached to, his mission really was the freedom from colonialism of India, you know, maintaining the integrity of India. And he even dressed in, you know, very simple, humble clothes. But the problem is, if we focus too much on those examples, we go, well, I could never be Gandhi. That's not me. So I'm sure that there are many humble leaders in the corporate sector who I can't quote because I just don't know them. But one who springs to mind just in the, say in terms of leaders of countries, Prime Minister of New Zealand really intrigues me and fascinates me, Jacinda Ardern, because she seems to have this knack of really showing compassion for her population, her people, and to the point where she will take a back seat to allow others to speak, to focus on issues that are important. You know, recently she organised a whole meeting of all the leaders in the world to talk about how do we get vaccines out. This is in the context of COVID. How do we make sure that developing countries have access to vaccines? You know, how we in the Western countries that have a surplus of vaccines, how can we share that around? All she was the chair of the meeting. She wasn't trying to claim the meeting as her own. She just organised it, then she sat back and let others take the stage and have their say. So I think, you know, that's a good example of humble leadership. And she's very basic, you know, she invites celebrities to come to her table for dinner and she'll feed them a sausage sandwich fresh off the barbecue. You know, she's not there to impress people. She's quite comfortable in her own skin. So I think, you know, she's an example. Maybe people listening can start to think also about, you know, the humble leader applying that lens, because when you start to look for them, they pop up.
Yes, and I'm looking at the quote you shared. If leaders come from a position of humility, seeking to help others and learn new ideas, rather than compete to be the best, they can use collaboration as a springboard for success. And I think, you know, sometimes, like you talked about the narcissistic leader, the definition for success for that person might be individual success versus collective success. And
exactly, yeah.
And the greater impact of making the world a better place, or helping us lift ourselves up rather than knocking people down to get ourselves up, is, I think, part of that process of being humble and you know, not stepping on others. But and I think that's also something that I think about, like whether being stepped on is a risk of showing humility. And that's another, I mean, as we think about tips to share for people who are thinking about being humble or whether or not they're humble, like I'd love to kind of dig into some actual kind of advice and ideas that you might have to kind of build our humility muscles and work through some of the risks or challenges, or kind of how people might be questioning us.
Yeah, that's an interesting angle to take, because we can, by misunderstanding humility, mistake it for something like martyrdom. You know, so we go, oh, I'll put myself last in order that others can flourish, and I'll bury myself in that space. And that's another way of, that's the ego again showing up in a kind of unlikely way. But when we suppress ourselves or overexpress ourselves, that's the ego showing up. So if ever you've been in a situation where you go, well, I don't quite agree with this, but I won't say anything because I don't want to upset the room, that's the ego. Now, the humble leader in that situation will, having allowed others to speak, well, then if they see that the conversation is going down an unhealthy route, for instance, or needs to be pulled up, will quietly but very constructively and with conviction say, well, let's look at it from this way. What if we started to approach it this way and start to consciously steer the conversation along a healthier path? So speaking with conviction when it's necessary, you know, there's and becoming showing anger when it's necessary, noble anger, not anger coming from fear, but you know, not the anger of a tyrant, but the anger of someone who's deeply passionate about something and wants to speak to the truth of that. You know, so I think you know, Janice, as we get more familiar with this subject, we start to develop our own radar. We get a sense of when someone is the real deal or when they're really in it for themselves, and we start to see the qualities of someone who is really there for a genuine reason. And I'd say just about always they have they're putting themselves beneath something that is bigger than themselves, you know, a mission that they really believe in. That's really what's driving them. So it's actually not about them, and therefore it's not that they don't have a fear of losing something by giving away their power to someone else, because they've already done that. They've already surrendered that to the greater cause.
Yeah, I love that, Janet. It sounds like, you know, the confidence that you find deep inside yourself when you develop that humility and the humbleness. And you mentioned something about also kind of that true or genuine motivation. And welcome to the stage, Mark. It's so good to see you here. And I think you might have some great insights on humility and how it relates to career, as well as, you know, as a skill. I was also thinking when you talked about, Janet, the people might think that you don't have the right motivations, or you get that radar to sense it. I wonder if people who are not as humble or don't have the humility have that radar, and whether we can actually gain that skill or shift ourselves, or how do we develop ourselves or other leaders to kind of gain this muscle of humility. And I don't know if you call it a muscle or kind of a trait, or what you know, how you describe it. So, and Mark, feel free to jump in if you want to ask a question too.
Yeah, I think, look, I'm speaking from my own experience in the work I do with people, Jana, so I can't say this is a universal truth, but I believe that as humans, we are born with a destiny, and that if we want to pursue that destiny, we have to go on a type of hero's journey, I would best describe it. And that hero's journey involves confronting that part of us that Jung would call the undiscovered self, or the shadow self. And in society, we've been trained to run away from that aspect of ourselves, to be fearful of the fear, and to not confront our pain. So to literally take a pill, whatever pill is available, to avoid pain, to anesthetize ourselves to life, to numb ourselves out, you know, through work. That was my pill. Work was my addiction, or whatever our addiction is. And until we actually stop that behavior and go, right, I'm hurting enough now to want to change my life. So I had to be totally smashed around to reach that point. Not everyone does. But until we reach that point, everything is purely intellectual. So talk about humility is just an intellectual concept. It's unlikely that we can truly embrace it until we've done that voyage back into ourselves. That's my belief.
Yes, I think that there is a true voyage, and doing it by ourselves, and then also figuring out how to you know, do it with others as well is part of the journey, I think.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, and this is where it's hard. You know, I was a bit of a lone wolf. Well, actually, I was a big martyr, really. I was all about sacrificing myself, my kids, my husband, my work. You know, I just worked really hard. It was a total, and I thought I was being noble and good. So when we're in that state of mind, we silo ourselves off, right? So we become these lone creatures, disconnected from others, disconnected from ourselves. And in that space, it's really hard to ask for help, right? What happens is if you look at the hero's journey, you know, if you look at any of the classic hero's journeys, you know, like Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, or, what was the fellow in the Matrix? Anyway, in Matrix. But the thing that they all have in common is a guide. So you can't actually do this work on your own, I don't think. You need to have a guide. And that's really where, you know, we invite whoever that guide might be. You know, it might be a therapist or a coach or someone to show us the way. We have to follow in the footsteps of others. So in a way, we have to surrender something to allow someone to guide us through this hero's journey, where we go back into our past, find out what it is that's our essential wound, if you like, you know, the childhood wound that's caused by some kind of trauma from the past, which we all carry. You know, trauma is universal. It's not just something that some people have. And then find out the legacy of that trauma, the pain that got created, how has that turned up defensive behavior in life?
Hi, Janet, you were breaking
And
up
then
just
we
a
can
bit,
start
just so you
thinking
know.
about,
I don't know if
oh,
you can hear me.
thanks, Janice. I can hear you, yes, yeah.
If
Is that better?
Yes, that
Can you
is
hear me
better.
now?
Yep, if you can repeat what you just said, that would be great.
Yeah. So basically, in the hero's journey, one of the players in that journey is a guide. And so I feel, I don't know that I could have ever got on the hero's journey myself successfully. I basically had to find different people to guide me, but that's the process, that we have to find someone that we trust to guide us to our past, really fasten those demons, the aspects of us that we haven't really confronted. There's always fear around that. You know, what if I don't like who I see? You know, my fear was, what if there's no one there? But I've never found that to be true. In all the people I've worked with who I've taken on this journey, what they see when they finally witness their true self is someone bigger than they ever imagine. You know, someone who is essentially good and loving. You know, that's the true self. Someone that is kind and compassionate. And when we know that of ourselves, we can start to relax, make peace with our past, show up as the person we really are. But it's a process, Janice, you know, and it's not for everyone. Not everyone wants to do that. A lot of people are happy to with what they have and live a life of quiet despair, as I would have called mine. But others just have to take action. And yeah.
So I'd love for Mark to introduce yourself, Mark, if you are able to talk, and share any insights you have around humility. I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself. I'll give you a second to do so. Hi, Mark.
Yes, I'm mostly just listening in because I have had an exhausting weekend after 2 exhausting weeks. So in terms of humility, I think it certainly goes to the type of leadership someone is creating, because those who choose more of an authoritarian approach to their leadership, they might not choose to show humility. Personally not a fan of authoritarian leadership, but it is certainly one of the styles. For other types, particularly more of a style that kind of encompasses everyone, for a style that's more relational to the people, I think it makes sense to show humility. I certainly show humility, weakness, areas where I'm not perfect, because that's more natural to my style of leadership. But different people are going to choose different styles, and I think the humility can play into that or go against it depending on your style.
Thanks for sharing that, Mark. And I'm sorry to hear you've been so exhausted the past 2 weeks. I hope you have a chance to get some rest. I'm going to bring Pachi up on stage too. Janet, I'd love to also hear if you can share a little bit more about the idea of being bigger or smaller than what you think, because I think that's the self-deflating, self-inflating kind of, like, how going back to humility and how that's kind of finding who you authentically are.
Yeah.
Can you dive into that with the room?
Absolutely, yeah. And thanks also, Mark, for your comment as well, because just to know that you've got that awareness of the different types of leadership is really helpful, and to know how that works for you in your position would be interesting as well too. But I'll just in terms of the smaller self and then the hyperinflated self. So I call this the pain pendulum, right? And we tend to, it's very interesting how there's so much finger pointing going on right now about how divided the world is. You know, we're seeing it with the whole COVID thing, whether to vaccinate or not, or, you know, are you an anti-vaxxer? We see it in the political realm. It's almost like duality is the flavor of the world at the moment. And we know why that's happening through algorithms, etc. on social media. It's actually being exaggerated to a point, but to the more probably than in the history of mankind, because we now have the technology to divide people. But imagine that all of that is a mirror for what's going on inside of every one of us. So my belief, and this speaks to my mission, if you like, is that while we are divided as individuals internally, we're going to continue to see this dualistic structure in the external world. And so my mission, if you like, is to bring integrity or wholeness or a sense of oneness back into at the individual level, because I think this is a problem with 7 billion separate parts. The problems that we face right now come down to the individual level. Individuals created the problem. Individuals need to raise their consciousness, to wake the F up, as I would say, in order to create change on a larger level. And so we have to understand those two divisive aspects of ourselves. So that speaks back to the small self, Janice, you know, that's encapsulated by the core destructive belief. And, you know, I was talking to a woman the other day, a beautiful woman, and she was Indian, and she said, yeah, my mum used to say in Hindi, she used to call me a lump of shit, you know. And so sometimes it can be as literal as that, like a mental tattoo that's been given to us, inflicted on us by a parent who is just a bit unconscious. You know, they're not necessarily meaning bad, but in a fit of rage or anger, they'll say things like this, and these things stick, and they then form us. They form the idea of who we are, which is, of course, a lie. It's not who we are. But to overcompensate for that, that's when we go down the, you know, the overinflated track and try to be bigger and better, you know, like a workaholic. Oh, well, I'll prove them wrong. I'll prove to my mum I'm not a lump of shit. We're not doing that consciously. We're doing it on a subconscious level, but that's what's driving us, typically to a point of exhaustion and burnout. And we see that a lot in the entrepreneurial space. So these two aspects of us, the pain pendulum that we tend to swing between, we need to bring to the surface. And when it's, you know, as they say it, when you're in it, you can't see it. When you can see it, you're no longer in it. When you can finally call out these two false identities that sit at the extremes of who we are, we don't want to get rid of them. We don't want to annihilate them, because that would be killing off a part of ourselves. But we want to rebalance so that they're not driving our bus anymore, so that the true self can emerge. And that true self, how that true self shows up is quintessentially as the humble leader, the leader who demonstrates humility, because we no longer have that egoic self trying to prove that, you know, we're someone who we're essentially not.
Yeah, and I'm also looking at this training you gave about humble leaders and how the humble leader connects with others on a deeper level, doesn't feel threatened or insecure. So I think insecurity is such a huge part of both ends of that spectrum of wanting to, you know, be more than you are, or wanting to you know, shrink and shrivel up and hide yourself. So the truly humble leader has that confidence not to feel threatened or insecure, and also allows others to shine in their unique way. Because I think that's something where I often struggle with, you know, wanting to have things my way versus somebody else's way, and letting others be themselves is, I think, something that I personally need to work on as a leader and collaborator. And then being able to sow those seeds of collaboration rather than competition. I think there are so many leaders I've seen who kind of, there's fear as well in that insecurity that you'll get destroyed. And so it's putting up that protective shield, I think, that kind of masks or kind of overtakes humility in some ways. Prachi, I don't know if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and introduce yourself as well.
All right. So first of all, hi, my name is Prachi and I'm from India, and I have followed all of you because I really like the topic, and it would be great if you could follow back and we could be in touch. So hi, my name is Prachi and I'm from India, and by profession I'm a marketer, and all the professional accolades are there in my bio. You can go check it out. So I have one question about this topic in general. Are we talking about leaders in general, right? We're talking about leaders in general, right? In the entrepreneurial space.
Yes, I was actually going to jump into, entrepreneurial leaders versus corporate leaders versus nonprofit leaders or government leaders. I mean, I think there are so many different types of leaders, and I think being humble and strong applies to all types. And Janet, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I think that, thanks, Prachi, for the introduction, and also for that question. It's a really interesting question. So what makes a leader? And look, in my observation, what I've seen is that when you can integrate the two aspects of yourself, the divided self, and become whole, no matter who you are, a mother who's never worked, for instance, your natural leader will emerge at that point. So it can work in any context, Prachi. It's obviously relevant to people in the corporate sector who are managing teams because they really are at the coalface. They have responsibility for other people. But, you think about every individual on this planet, they are all potentially interacting with others, whether it's family, relatives, friends, whatever it is. We all have the potential to step up to be someone bigger than we currently are and show leadership. So I like to think of leaders as there's an inner leader within all of us, even though we might, in terms of our behavior profile, like Janice, you might be a natural driver. So in a way, it's kind of natural for you to want to take charge. So you don't want to feel bad about that because that's who you really are. And then there are other people who might be more naturally supporters. And someone like Mother Teresa was a good example of that. She was a natural supporter, but she was also a very strong leader in her realm. So I think the discovery of humility is an invitation to everyone to bring forth that inner leader, regardless of the context.
So I agree with it, but in my opinion, it has a lot to do with emotional intelligence, because when you have that in your system, it's then when you have all the qualities that you mentioned, being humble and having that basic sense to analyze, what is wrong with your team and giving them that comfort to share their opinions, because it's very easy to just sort of come forward as a person with authority, but justifying to that authority is something which might turn out to be a Herculean task for many people, because it has to do a lot with your emotional intelligence. And in fact, it's not only about, understanding your people's feelings, your team members' feelings, that, okay, she is in a bad mood or she is happy. It's all about acting upon it as well. If you're not giving that safe space for your people, to your people, wherein they can share their opinions both personally and professionally, if they have that kind of comfort with you from a personal perspective, I feel like it is more about that. It is validating them when it's required, because I have seen, especially being in the advertising industry since over like 3-4 months, I have seen that, of course, the kind of work that you do is so much. It's literally it's quite a lot, right? It's quite humongous. And all the big brands, you work for, be it Dove, be it Netflix, and all these big brands, it's good to say that I'm working on these brands, but you do not get any recognition for that, right? And I have seen people leaving their teams, people leaving good and stable jobs because of the fact that they were not getting validated enough, even by the internal team, right? That, hey, good job done. So I think that being the leader, instead of jumping onto extremely, I'd say, big concepts and big topics, right? It's better if you start working on yourself from the very scratch and understand the overall dynamics of your team, first of all. And then second of all, just understand that how, you can inculcate all the amazing changes in your team. And even I am heading 2 teams right now. So I'm a part of 2 global organizations. One would be Inactus. It's a global organization of entrepreneurs wherein we undertake, projects in alignment with the UN SDGs, the 17 SDGs. The other one would be Girl Up. It's again an initiative under United Nations to curb racial discrimination and colorism and all of these issues, right, which prevail in the society. And I'm heading 2 teams right now. In fact, I'm heading 3 teams right now. And this one thing that I have noticed is that your EQ has to be top notch, because if that is not the case, that is not, nothing is going to motivate my team members to join a team meeting and present their opinions, because I don't want them to be there in the sit idle, right? I want them to come there and be interactive and present their opinions and just sort of like, have that understanding, right? And I've literally seen this, that if at times I have, I've had a imbalance with my emotions, that has not turned out to be good for my team, right? And being a leader also means how rationally you think, because I have seen people becoming very impulsive and just reacting to what somebody. So for example, if Janet tells me that this is what your team members were speaking about you behind your back, as a rational leader, I should take time to process those thoughts and then only take an action on it, right? I hope you're able to understand where I'm getting at, because I know these might sound very silly to people like those who have so much of experience, but I'm sure that you are aware of how people make these kind of impulsive decisions, right? And even I did. I got influenced by that person who said that, this is what your team members were saying about you. So much so that I just made this decision that, what, I don't want this person in my team. Because to be honest, Janet, I'm not that kind of a leader who just comes and, sits and goes. And I have, taken up so many sessions for my team members pertaining to email marketing, content marketing, public relations, branding, and that too for free. Because honestly, you do not get these kind of systems for free. People charge money for it. And I have been a very invested leader for all of my teams. So I definitely thought that, hey, is this what I'm getting out in return? Because being a leader, it is very imperative that you analyze that what is the kind of value that you are getting out of your team, right? So I got influenced by that, and I called up that person. I was like, listen, I don't want you in my team. And honestly, I regret doing that, because what I had heard and what had happened, there was so much of difference between that. And I did question my abilities as a leader. But I feel like, hey, this was an experience, and we learn everything from the experiences we go through, right? Our experiences do not define us. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. So yeah, as of now, I'm speaking. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Do you want me to jump in on this, Janet?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Janet.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Prachi, when you talk about emotional intelligence. Absolutely. And it's to be able to understand how people feel, you start to develop an idea of what they're afraid of too. And I think fear is the thing that we need to bring to the surface here. If anything is going to stop us being humble, it's fear. So if you can go back to that situation where you heard that kind of gossip, about someone saying something about behind your back, and then your response was to be impulsive. Yeah, I totally relate to that. I've made so many decisions based on impulsivity, which I've gotten to regret later. But if you can keep a presence of mind when you hear that news, that information, if you like, just notice how it makes you feel. And something that I find very helpful is I have a radar for where is it showing up in my body. Because if it shows up in my stomach as a pit in my stomach, for instance, or you might feel it as a tightening across your chest, or you might feel it as a clamping across your throat, or you might feel yourself flushing, your temperature goes up. But just notice, how is it showing up in your physical body? Chances are, if it's not a feeling of neutrality or equanimity, where you've got a distance between you and the event, if it's showing up as a physical response in your body, that's my radar for, fear is at play here. And that's where I take a step back and I go, right, I've got to sleep on this, or if it's an email, don't hit send, give it, look at it the next morning with fresh eyes. So for me, maintaining that emotional intelligence that you talk about and not riding a roller coaster of emotions in response to someone else's behavior is about keeping that fear radar very carefully honed. and understanding when I'm likely to act out of fear as against, if you like, compassion or kindness. Does that make sense?
That makes absolute sense, and I feel like the presence of mind element that you brought up, these are again so simple things, right? These are very simple things of our life, and still these are extremely difficult to implement when it comes to real life. To give an example to relate to this narrative that you presented, that being a good listener is a very undervalued quality. But in real life, if you do not have a good listener in your life, you would not want to continue any kind of relationship with that person, right? Because you know what I'm trying to say, right? And people just think that it's easy. Yeah, you just need to listen to that other person. No, it's not just about listening. It's about investing yourself in that listening. That you're showing some sort of an inquisitiveness towards what the person is sharing to you. It's about showing value to that person's emotions, right? And in fact, in a team, I have definitely, because I am an amazing listener, I won't deny, I've seen that being in a team and having these kind of qualities as a leader has helped me. Because what happens is that when you're a leader, you need to differentiate that, okay, these are the qualities I have in my personal life. This is what I do. What is it that I need to take out of my personal life in a professional scenario, right? So I'm an overthinker and I'm an anxious person by nature. But I try not to have that in a professional scenario, because that is something which, the repercussions of which are not good. You understand what I'm trying to say, right? So I think that when you differentiate that, okay, these are the qualities that I need to take out from my personal life, and I chose to take this quality out of my personal life and replicate the same in a professional scenario. Like if I'm being complicated, please, I'm sorry about that. But the quality that I absolutely adore about myself is being a good listener. And when I replicated the same, I think, Janet, I was able to expand my professional network like anything. And obviously, because I'm a very adaptable person by nature, ever since I started interning, people above 25, above 30, they have this comfort. And I have friends who's 47, 20, and I'm only 90, by the way, right? So they would come to me and they would discuss their problems, and I would listen to them. And at the end of it, they'll say, this is actually so baffling that, we've never had this kind of a comfort with anyone, that we actually like sharing things. So I feel like that this has genuinely helped me. So I feel you should be able to differentiate that, okay, this is something that I want to take out of my personal life. That's my take on it.
Yeah. What I'm hearing from you, Prachi, is someone who's really aware of the importance of self-awareness. And I can see that's your journey. When I was at school, I had the teacher gave my mother some information that she wasn't supposed to. It was supposed to be confidential. She said to my mum, Janet's got an A after her name. And my mum puffed up and went, oh, that's great, an A student. And the teacher said, no, A for anxious. And anxiety has been what's driven me in my life. And I heard you talking about anxiety. And anxiety will get you so far, particularly at the age that you're at. You're firing on all cylinders. You're ambitious. You really want to get those runs on the board. But left unattended, the anxiety will start to grow. I'm only speaking from my own experience here. And so anxiety, of course, is another form of fear. So what I hear from you is that to really master emotional intelligence, perhaps, a part of your journey is going to be going, okay, what's keeping me anxious? What is that all about? Because doing more, in my experience, will exacerbate the anxiety. It won't quell it. Going to the root cause of the anxiety is the way to achieve that sense of inner peace that we're looking for. That's really what we're seeking here, is a sense of peace and groundedness. Going back to that the original meaning of the word humility, from the Latin humilis, of the earth, coming back to that place of groundedness where we have our feet on the ground, coming from our true nature. And that perhaps that for you could be the greatest shift of all, to find out what is the root cause of that anxiety. Does that resonate?
So to be honest, I have Yeah, Janet, I'm coming to that. First of all, I'm pronouncing your name right, right? Is it? I'm pronouncing your name right? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. So I've had anxiety for many years, and I've seen people actually misunderstanding it with the fact that, you know what? Oh, I was feeling. I had anxiety before exam. That is not anxiety. That's nervousness, right? But if you have symptoms before an exam, like if you're sweating, if you're throbbing, and you have a certain symptoms which a normal person with genuine anxiety would have. Why do I say this term genuine anxiety? Is because that social media has made us believe in so many things which we are not. If I'm being honest, and social media is a huge part of the Gen Z culture, and this social media hegemony has led to this point wherein almost every other person thinks that, oh, I'm having anxiety. So we have normalized things which we should not have done. And I partially take blame in it because I'm a part of this generation as well, which made this happen. Right? That I've had anxiety for quite some time now. And honestly, I can just definitely say that if you hear somebody saying that, oh, I had anxiety and now I don't anymore, they're lying, they're straight up lying, and they never had anxiety because these issues, anxiety, overthinking, OCD, these are not those issues which, just leave you just like that. They are lifelong. Bipolar, they're lifelong. It's just that with time, you just learn how to control its intensity.
Yeah.
For example, I'm an anxious person in general, but I'm not feeling anxious right now. I'm at total peace and I'm loving the discussion, right? This is how it is. Just learn how to control its intensity. You never get to be a person who's free of anxiety. Because that is not going to happen. And I think each and every human being somewhat goes through that emotional imbalance. Some people come out of it totally fine, and some people come out of it with mental health issues, and it's totally fine. It's not something wrong to have these kind of issues in your life. They make you stronger, but they make you erase yourself a lot more. This is what I have, realized. I turned these things into my strength. Being an overthinker somewhat ruined my personal relationships at one point, and I'm not gonna lie, they did. But now, when I think about it, and overthinking plus an intuitive mind that I have, so that has been working out for me. And I'm not justifying this toxic trait because it gets why do I say that it's toxic? Because it turned out to be toxic for me. So, but anyways, the gist of what I was just trying to say was that it's okay. When even I think we also need to normalize that leaders can have mental health issues, and it's fine if they have an imbalance in the team, or if they say things which they're not supposed to, because we have this positioning that, oh my god, how could you say it? You're a leader. I'm a human too, and I have got issues too. So if being a leader, I can respect your mental health, then even you should do the same. Because you can't expect me to leave my anxiety when I enter the workplace, right? I am going to make mistakes. I might say things which I'm not supposed to. But at the end of it, I will realize my mistake and I am ready to come out of it. So you need to respect my mental space as well. And this is something which I have not seen happening. When you're a leader, then only one thing comes into people's mind that okay, with great responsibility, with great what was that called? With great authority comes great responsibility.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Or you could reframe that: with great responsibility comes great power. I'm quoting my daughter there.
Exactly. And that's how you position your leader. And I do not position my leaders like that. All those who have mentored me by now, I have never ever had this positioning about them that they're gonna be perfect, they're gonna mentor me in every way possible. Of course they're gonna mentor me, but I do give them that space. That it's fine. Yeah. That's that subconscious space, that if you're my leader, I'm gonna give you that space. Yeah. Yeah, I'm done speaking, Jenny. Please.
I think
we're losing you. You're breaking. Your voice is lagging, I feel.
Oh, okay. Okay. How is that now?
It's better now.
It's
better.
Is it better? Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So Prachi, is that how I pronounce? Is that how I pronounce your name, Prachi?
Yeah, it's Prachi.
Prachi. Yeah. So I like what you said there about not only talking about anxiety, but owning it and being upfront about these weren't your words, but what I heard was, being vulnerable and saying I'm not the perfect leader. I suffer from anxiety. It's not like it's going to suddenly go away just because I'm in the workforce. In fact, managing these teams, in fact, probably is going to show up more. I think that's really, if we're going to create, if you like, a tick box list of traits of a humble leader, I definitely think that's one of them, to share your vulnerability, your areas of challenge, where you've struggled. I know myself where I've done that, not that long ago, I was going, why am I doing this? Should I give up? Would it be easier? I really did sit with that possibility. And part of me just said, no, there's no way, you just can't. But even so, I just posted on that and I just saw the resonance that had. And I guess that's being, open and vulnerable and not being fearful of the consequences. And I think
that's totally true. That's completely true. And I feel that a part of leadership is not just about getting things done. Honestly, ever since we're kids and, when you enter the corporate, this is something which people tell you that, you're not a good leader because you're not getting things done from your team. And I say that this is not the definition of a leader for me, because a part of a good leader is also to foster good and valuable connections with your team members, right? So that they can also get vulnerable in front of you, and even you can. You get what I'm trying to say? This is one aspect which so many people do not talk about. They don't want to talk about that, how imperative it is to foster valuable connections as well. So I feel like that is something that I would rather focus on. Of course, I'm going to give them work, and honestly, touch wood, up until now, I've had amazing teams to, head, to lead. All the work is done within a time frame. But apart from it, the more auspicious feeling for me would be when my team members have that comfort with me, they call me up. And just, that's the first thing to say that, we're so much comfortable sharing our problems with you that you're the first person who came to my mind when I had this problem. So I feel like that is more of a victorious feeling for me, that that is when I feel that, okay, I've genuinely been a good leader because they're respecting me enough and, they're coming to me with the problems, be it professional, be it personal, which is why I feel like that I have 25 plus people in my team. It's quite a minimal number, I mean, for somebody with your experience. But I have seen people, actually on my level, not even able to manage, they're not even able to manage teams with like 5 people or 6 people. I mean, this is how it is. And to be honest, I do not position myself as that kind of a leader, that I'm going to get things done and I'm a leader, so I'm going to be super authoritative. Of course, I'm going to be authoritative. At the end of the day, all the decisions are going to be taken up by me. But it's at the end of the day, it is going to be me who chooses that how am I actually going to implement the positioning which has been given to me by the society. So that's what I think,
Yeah, and Janet, feel free to jump in as well. I've heard Prachi share a few things that you're working on or that you demonstrate that are on, Janet, your list of 10 ways to build your humility. And I'd love to kind of go over those 10 as we get close to wrapping up this room. I usually go for an hour, but it looks like a couple more people are in here. And I welcome anyone to come up, introduce themselves and ask a question. And Janet, I don't know how long you have to stay in the room as well.
No, that's fine. I can talk for a few more minutes. Maybe if you bring up whatever of those, we might not have time to go through all 10 ways, but I'm happy for you to nominate some of the ways you think will keep the discussion as is.
Yeah, maybe I'll summarize them quickly. And the first one is being an active listener, which is what Prachi had said, being a good listener. And that's something I always feel I need to improve on, or I would like to really understand what people are saying. So that, I think, as the first one, is definitely one that pops up as something I want to work on. expressing gratitude, making decisions based on the best interest of the group, practicing mindfulness, embracing your humanness, being others focused, asking for help when you need it, seeking feedback from others on a regular basis, speaking your mind constructively, and reframing mistakes and disappointment as opportunities for growth. And I feel like, some of these are ways that you build yourself, and then ways that you build the team or the people you're working with. Like the mindfulness and the humanness are things that are internally focused versus your own mindfulness and your own humanness. Whereas you turn outward with being others focused and seeking feedback. I really like the reframing mistakes and disappointment as opportunities for growth too, because I think that's like a personal way of, so it almost feels like there are two categories in the list. And feel free to jump in with your final thoughts, Janet, or Prachi or Mester.
Yeah, I like how you've divided them. Yeah, it's very true. There are some inner ones, inward ones, and outward ones. And what I would just finish that by saying, you probably can't achieve the outward facing ones until you've done the inner work. That's what I feel. You can try, but it's not going to have the same level of authenticity. Ultimately, where we want to get to on this journey, and as you know, Janice, there are many laws. In fact, there are 52 laws that we study. So humility is just one of them. But if we want to take the overarching reason that we're even talking here today, what we're doing, the thing that brings me to this room is to see that inner transformation in the individual so that they can achieve a level of inner peace. That to me, that's my mission, if you like. And so that achieving of inner peace, we need to do that work first, I believe, before we can genuinely be there for someone else. We can try, but it feels, and I'm talking about my experience and people I've worked with, it's much, much harder. So it's almost like there's a sequence to this. The sequence is to turn inwards first, and then we can truly turn outwards. We get out of our own way. We resolve that inner trauma that we all have, that's universal. It's not just the domain of an unfortunate few. We all carry a wound. Once we heal that wound, the best way to keep healing that wound is to put ourselves out there for others, doing what we enjoy and being of service to them. That feels like the journey to me. So that's the order of events, if you like, doing the inner work first, and then once out of our own way, becoming others focused.
That's great. And Mester, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and share a thought about ways you might build your humility?
Greetings from Kenya, which is in East Africa. With your permission, I'll ask a question. Yeah?
Absolutely.
I've come across something like this humility where, there are people who are naturally, we are all different and unique in our own ways. And maybe some of these traits need to be cultivated. But does it mean that, if someone is maybe not humble, is a bad person, he cannot make a good leader? The reason why I ask this is because I'm just from one of our Kenyan rooms where people tell me, you're forceful, you talk, you're like this, you're like that, change this, change that. And if I was to change to please everybody, then I would cease being me, and I doubt it can even be done in the first place. So how do you reconcile that with, greatness and being someone who's want to serve others? I don't know whether my question is makes sense, but thank you, and I'm done speaking.
Would you like me to step in here, Janice?
Yes, please, Janet.
Yeah. I think it's a great question, and I think it really goes to the heart of the whole issue. How do I know I'm being a humble leader when this is what I'm hearing from you, Master, when I am advocating change and yet it's coming across the wrong way? So, you know, essentially, if you've just jumped into this conversation, the whole tone of this conversation has been that really humility comes from understanding who we really are, you know, who you are at the very core, your sum total of experiences, the pain that's created in your life and how you've resolved that pain. So it's a deep inner journey. But so without doing all of that work, how can we start to understand the difference between humility and maybe ego-driven leadership or narcissistic leadership? So just think about it from this point of view to when you're advocating change, is it coming from a feeling of frustration? Look at go to what you're feeling at the time that you're in that room and you're speaking at. Is it coming from frustration or some kind of fear? Or is it being propelled by something else that feels right to you, that is a genuine desire to see improvement in others? So that's just one question to ask. Where is it coming? Is it coming from love? Is it coming from fear? Or is it coming from compassion? And the second one is just a technical point. You know, I often feel I get into this space of soapbox. You know, I can become a preacher. I'm aware of that. And one of the hardest things for me, but I see this as the mark of someone who is truly humble, is to get into the space of asking questions. Okay, so maybe raising a problem or an issue in that room, Master, and then saying, how could we address this? Giving it back to the group, inviting others to step up and offer their solutions. So you're really an adjudicator rather than someone who's telling people what to do. Does that make sense?
It does, but it does. And thank you so much for that. But the question was, you know, trying to implement change, but people are questioning your presentation, your character, you know, change this, change that. I mean, sometimes, you know, you're only human, and sometimes you snap and
So one of the points that Dennis was going through, you know, how to build the humility muscle, if you like, is to ask for feedback. So maybe this is just a tip, right? It's not necessarily a solution to a problem, but maybe when you are presenting, doing a formal presentation, to at the beginning of the presentation say, I'm going to present this and I'm going to invite you to give your feedback at the end because I really want to hear your thoughts on this, how it could be improved or suggestions. So that is one of the hallmarks of a humble leader, is to seek feedback from the team so that again, you're not holding all the power, you're spreading the power as equally as possible. Does that make sense, Master?
it does. Thank you. Yeah, it does. That makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it would be wonderful for us to close out this room. I like to ask everyone on stage just to share one insight or one key takeaway. And Prachi, Master, Janet, why don't we start with you, Prachi, and just go around the room with a takeaway or something you plan to do.
So my takeaway would be that being a leader, it is, you know, of course, your responsibility to validate your team members and to give them that space of comfort. And it has a lot to do with your EQ, your emotional quotient, as I emphasized in the beginning. But as a team member as well, because this is part of a holistic leadership that you're trying to achieve. Mental health is something which should not be compromised at any cost, right? So if you're giving that comfort to your team members, it's only fair if you get that comfort from your team members in return, right? So I feel like that is my biggest takeaway, to foster valuable connections and to prioritize your mental health and your team members' mental health. And because without having a healthy balance, it's not possible to actually put your mind to work. So I feel like that is my takeaway.
That's great, Prachi. And what about you, Master? Do you have a takeaway?
My takeaway is to share power in an intelligent way by encouraging feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Master. And Janet, do you want to share your takeaway from this session?
Yeah, my takeaway is that it's an observation really that the more I engage in these conversations, the more I hear the important things coming to the surface. So talking about emotion, talking about whatever it is that where we feel challenged. So Master, you know, as the humble leader, your ability to listen and learn something already says that you've got that ability. Maybe you could even you know, share that further, vulnerability. But my takeaway is really that we are bringing mental health, and maybe there's a better term for it, right? But you know, emotional fitness or something like that. But that we're actually bringing this to the surface. This is first step in massive societal change, in an overall societal raising of consciousness or waking up. This is so important. So I'm in admiration of sharing your stories.
I think we lost you. Your voice is lagging, Janet.
So
Yes, Janet, you're
Sorry,
breaking
all right.
up. You broke up for that last sentence or two. I don't know if you can try to repeat
Sure.
yourself just one more time.
yeah.
Are you able to talk, Janet, or do we lose you? Still, we can't hear you.
Right on.
We still can't hear you. I think your network is like acting
No,
up.
okay. In that case, just I think so. Yeah. All right. Just leave it there in that case.
Yes, and I'm happy to also kind of wrap up in terms of my key takeaway. And I think what you said, Janet, about the sequence of doing things was really, you know, important in terms of doing the deep work myself and then turning outward. And so I think, you know, there's a lot to learn and a lot to kind of work on building the habits and the muscles. And I really appreciate this conversation and the inspiration to continue to work on emotional intelligence and humility and being a strong leader by putting others first.
So I'd just like to also add this one point which Janice said very beautifully in my takeaway, that when you're advocating change, your emotions also matter. That if you're advocating that change while being compassionate or being frustrated. So I think that was one thing which genuinely helped me to broaden my perspective, because now that I think about it, I won't lie, but there have been situations wherein I thought that, you know, I'm doing things for the good, I'm advocating this change in my team, but that was not born out of compassion. That was born out of under pressure, under frustration, and honestly, because you know, I'm a people pleaser, so I live under this constant pressure that, you know, people have to like me, they have to validate me also. So I feel like there have been not many, not all, but very few instances wherein when I was trying to advocate the change, the emotion, which was the root cause of it, it was not compassion. So I feel like that. Thank you, Janice, actually, for putting it that way, because it really helped me to think more about it.
Yes, thank you. And I hope we continue these conversations. Janet, do you want to say any final words?
No, I'm going to wind up there. I'm sorry the internet's been patchy where I'm staying at right now, but no, I'd just like to say I'm really appreciative of everyone sharing. And look, the more we can talk about this, the more we are going to see the change. Just talking about it is a radical difference, a radical shift from even 10 years ago. You know, we're seeing change happening very quickly. That inspires me. So thank you all for your input. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Prachi. Thank you, Master. Hope you have a good day, afternoon, evening.
Thank you. Good morning,
Thank you,
Yes.
Janice.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you guys. Bye-bye.